The first drops of rain splattered against the pavement as Melody Parker quickened her pace, holding her little brother closer to her chest. The dark clouds had been threatening all afternoon, and now they opened up just as the shops were closing for the night. She ducked under the blue awning of Hill's music shop, pressing her back against the doorway to escape the downpour. "It's okay, Eli," she whispered as her 8-month-old brother squirmed against her. "We'll wait it out here." Melody shifted the worn backpack on her shoulder and peered down at Elijah's round face. His big brown eyes, so much like their mother's, stared back at her. Sometimes when he looked at her like that, it felt like Mom was still with them somehow. 3 months. That's how long it had been since the hospital called to tell her that her mother wasn't coming home. 3 months since Melody had become both sister and mother to Elijah. 3 months of living on the streets, sleeping wherever they could find shelter, and doing everything possible to keep them together. The rain came down harder now, drumming against the awning and forming puddles on the sidewalk. Through the store's window, Melody could see the beautiful grand piano on display, its polished surface gleaming under the security lights. Her fingers twitched at her sides, remembering the feel of piano keys. Before everything fell apart, her mother had taught her to play on their old upright piano, the one her stepdad had sold for drink money a week after the funeral. "Your mom was something special with those keys," an older neighbor had told her once. Could have been famous if she hadn't hurt her hands in that accident. Melody had inherited her mother's gift. The music lived inside her too, waiting to pour out whenever she found a piano. These days, that wasn't often. A police car cruised slowly down the wet street, and Melody instinctively stepped deeper into the shadows. The last thing she needed was another encounter with authorities. Last time, a well-meaning officer had almost called social services. Melody knew what would happen then. They'd take Elijah away, put him in foster care. They might even separate them completely. The thought made her hold her brother tighter. "Not going to happen," she promised him quietly. "We're sticking together, buddy. Just you and me." When the police car disappeared around the corner, Melody checked her watch, a gift from her mother for her 15th birthday, back when birthdays still meant something. It was nearly 9. The community shelter would be full by now, and the last time they'd gone, a staff member had asked too many questions about where their guardian was. Thunder rumbled overhead as Melody mentally ran through their options. They could try the bus station, but the security guard there had chased them away last week. The overpass by the river might work, but it would be damp from the rain, and Elijah had just gotten over a cold. She couldn't risk him getting sick again. "Let's try the community center," she decided, speaking to Elijah as if he could understand her plans. Talking to him helped her feel less alone. Maybe they forgot to lock the side door again. Tucking Elijah deeper into her jacket, Melody stepped out into the rain. Her shoes, donated by a church outreach program last month, were already worn at the soles and did little to keep out the water that pooled on the sidewalk. She walked quickly, head down against the rain, counting each block until they reached the brick building with its faded Westside Community Center sign. The community center had become their occasional sanctuary over the past few weeks. During the day, it was filled with after-school programs and senior citizen activities. But at night, if Melody timed it right and used the side entrance near the dumpsters, they could sometimes slip in unnoticed. The janitor, an older man with kind eyes and graying hair, had caught her once but had only nodded and walked away without saying anything. Tonight, luck was on their side. The door had been left unlocked, just as Melody had hoped. She slipped inside, the warmth of the building immediately enveloping them. Elijah's damp curls pressed against her neck as she navigated the dark hallways, moving from memory toward the small music room at the back of the building. The room wasn't much, just a few metal folding chairs, some worn music stands, and an old upright piano that had seen better days. But to Melody, it was a slice of heaven. She carefully set her backpack down and gently placed Elijah on a blanket she spread on the floor. "Just for a little while," she told him, running her fingers through his curls. "Then we'll find somewhere dry to sleep." Melody slipped off her wet jacket and hung it over a chair to dry. Then she opened her backpack and pulled out a clean diaper, a small container of formula, and a bottle. Taking care of Elijah had become second nature to her now. She changed him quickly, her movements practiced and efficient. "There you go," she said, finishing up. "All dry now." While Elijah played with a set of plastic keys, a gift from a kind woman at the park who had noticed them there day after day, Melody prepared his bottle. She had exactly 2 portions of formula left. Tomorrow she would need to figure out how to get more. Once Elijah was settled with his bottle propped against her backpack, Melody turned to the piano. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the lid and revealed the black and white keys beneath. This moment, when it was just her, Elijah, and the piano, was when she felt most like herself again. She started softly, playing a lullaby her mother had taught her when she was just a little girl. The piano was out of tune, some keys sticking slightly, but it didn't matter. The music filled the small room, wrapping around them like an embrace. For those moments, Melody could pretend they weren't homeless. She could imagine they were back in their old apartment, before her mom got sick, before her stepdad started drinking heavily, before everything fell apart. In the music, she found the memories of better days. Sunday mornings with pancakes and laughter. Her mother teaching her to play heart and soul. The 3 of them cuddled on the couch watching old movies. Elijah finished his bottle and made a soft cooing sound that pulled Melody back to reality. She smiled at him, shifting to a different song, one she had composed herself during these late-night piano sessions. It was a melody filled with both sadness and hope, reflecting their life now. "Mom would be so proud of you," she told Elijah as he watched her with wide eyes. "You're growing so fast." Already trying to crawl. As she played, she thought about tomorrow. She had a spot near the coffee shop on Main Street, where she sometimes played her mother's old harmonica. People occasionally dropped coins or small bills in the cup she set out. On a good day, she could make enough for food and diapers. On bad days, well, she tried not to think about the bad days. The rain continued to drum against the windows as Melody's fingers danced across the keys. She lost track of time, lost in the music and memories. Elijah had fallen asleep on his blanket, one tiny hand curled around his plastic keys. When the janitor's cart rattled in the hallway outside, Melody quickly closed the piano. She gathered up Elijah, tucking him against her chest without waking him, and quickly packed her few belongings. By the time the janitor passed by the room, they were hidden in the supply closet, waiting for him to finish his rounds. Later, when the building was quiet again, Melody carried her sleeping brother to the small alcove behind the building. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a crisp, clean smell in the air. The alcove was protected from the wind and hidden from view of the street, as good a place as any to spend the night. Melody sat with her back against the wall, Elijah sleeping soundly in her arms. Above them, the clouds had cleared, revealing a sky full of stars. She remembered how her mother used to tell her that stars were windows to heaven, and that someday, if they were ever separated, they could look at the same stars and feel connected. "I'm doing my best, Mom," Melody whispered to the stars. "I promise I'm taking care of him." Tomorrow would bring new challenges, finding food, keeping Elijah clean and healthy, avoiding the authorities who might separate them. But for now, with her brother's steady breathing against her chest and the memory of music still lingering in her fingertips, Melody allowed herself a moment of peace. "We're going to be okay," she told Elijah softly, though he couldn't hear her through his dreams. "Somehow we're going to be okay." As she closed her eyes, Melody hummed the lullaby she had played earlier, letting the melody carry her toward sleep. In her dreams, she was playing on a grand stage, her mother watching proudly from the front row, Elijah growing up safe and loved. In her dreams, the music was enough to save them both. The community center buzzed with after-school activity as Melody waited across the street, bouncing Elijah gently in her arms. She'd learned the rhythms of this place over the past few weeks, when it was busiest, when certain rooms sat empty, and most importantly, when she might slip inside unnoticed to use the piano in the music room. "Just a little longer, Eli," she whispered, watching as a group of elementary school kids filed out with their backpacks and lunchboxes, greeted by waiting parents in cars and on foot. A pang of longing shot through her chest. That normal life seemed like something from a different world now. Elijah fussed in her arms, his tiny fist pushing against her collarbone. He was hungry again. Melody dug into her pocket and counted the coins she'd earned that morning playing harmonica outside the coffee shop. $3.27, not enough for more formula. They'd run out that morning and the panic was setting in. "Let's go," she said, crossing the street when the last of the children had left. She'd learned that between the after-school programs and the evening adult classes, there was a brief window when the building was nearly empty except for staff. Melody slipped in through the side door, moving quickly through the hallways she'd memorized. The music room door was ajar, and she peeked inside to make sure it was empty before entering. Relief washed over her when she saw the piano waiting, untouched in the corner. She settled Elijah on his blanket and reached into her backpack for his last bottle. "I know it's not much, buddy," she said, mixing the final scoop of formula with water from her refillable bottle. "But I promise I'll figure something out for tomorrow." While Elijah drank, Melody sat at the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys. This was the one place where the weight of their situation didn't crush her completely. When she played, she could breathe again. She began softly, playing a piece her mother had taught her years ago. Her mom had called it Moonlight, though Melody later learned it was part of a famous sonata. The notes filled the room, and as always, something inside her unlocked. She closed her eyes, letting her fingers remember the way, lost in the music. She didn't hear the door open. "That's beautiful." Melody's hands froze on the keys as she whipped around, heart hammering. A woman stood in the doorway. Early 30s maybe, with long dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and glasses perched on her nose. She carried a stack of sheet music and wore a name tag. Ms. Chen, music instructor. "I'm sorry," Melody stammered, already gathering Elijah and her things. "I know we're not supposed to be in here. We were just leaving." "No, please," the woman said, stepping into the room. "Don't stop on my account." "That was Beethoven, wasn't it? The Moonlight Sonata?" Melody paused, Elijah halfway into her arms. "Yes, my mom taught me." The woman, Ms. Chen, placed her stack of music on a nearby table and approached slowly, as if trying not to startle a wild animal. "You play beautifully. Are you taking lessons somewhere?" A bitter laugh escaped before Melody could stop it. "No, not anymore." Ms. Chen's eyes moved from Melody to Elijah, then to the worn backpack with its fraying straps, the nearly empty formula bottle, and back to Melody's face. Understanding seemed to dawn in her expression. But to Melody's relief, there was no pity there, just curiosity and something like recognition. "I'm Karen," the woman said, dropping the formality of her title. "I teach music here 3 evenings a week." "And you are?" Melody hesitated. Giving her name meant creating a connection, and connections were dangerous. But something about Karen's direct gaze made her answer anyway. "Melody, and this is my brother Elijah." "Melody," Karen repeated with a small smile. "That's fitting. How long have you been playing?" "Since I was 6. My mom was really good. She could have been famous, but..." Melody trailed off, suddenly aware she was saying too much. She bent down to pick up Elijah, who had started to fuss now that his bottle was empty. "He's hungry," Karen observed. "Have you had dinner? I brought some extra sandwiches for my late students, but they canceled." She gestured to a lunch bag sitting on the chair near the door. "I'd hate for them to go to waste." Melody's stomach growled traitorously. She hadn't eaten since the half muffin a barista had given her that morning. But accepting food meant staying, talking. Explaining Elijah's cry grew louder, and the decision was made for her. "Thank you," she said quietly, settling back down with Elijah in her lap. Karen brought over 2 wrapped sandwiches and a thermos. "It's just hot chocolate, nothing fancy," she said, pouring some into the cap of the thermos and handing it to Melody. "The nights are getting colder." They ate in silence for a few minutes, Elijah calming as Melody broke off tiny pieces of bread and cheese for him to gum. The sandwich was simple, cheese and turkey with lettuce, but it was the best thing she'd tasted in weeks. "So," Karen said finally, "what brings you to our piano?" Melody tensed, but Karen waved a hand. "You don't have to tell me everything, but I'm curious how someone with your talent ended up playing in an empty room after hours." Perhaps it was the kindness in Karen's voice, or maybe just the desperate need to talk to someone after months of speaking only to Elijah, but Melody found herself answering. "My mom died 3 months ago. Cancer. My stepdad. He couldn't handle it. Started drinking more. Then one day he just didn't come home." She stroked Elijah's curls as she spoke. "I didn't have anywhere to go. My mom's parents are gone and my dad left when I was 2. There's nobody else." "What about social services?" Karen asked gently. Melody's arms tightened around Elijah. "They'd take him away from me. Put him in the system. I promised my mom I'd keep him safe." Karen nodded, not arguing the point. Instead, she asked, "Do you play anything besides Beethoven?" The change of subject was so unexpected that Melody almost smiled. Lots of things. Classical mostly because that's what Mom taught me, but I've been making up my own songs too, especially at night when Eli can't sleep. Would you play something for me? Something of yours? Melody hesitated, then nodded. With Elijah settled in her lap, she turned back to the piano. This time she played the lullaby she'd composed for her brother in those first terrible weeks after their mother died, when he would cry for hours and nothing would soothe him. It was simple but haunting, with a melody that seemed to echo the feeling of rain against windows and the distant sound of traffic at night. When she finished, the room was silent except for Elijah's soft babbling. Melody turned to find Karen staring at her, an odd expression on her face. Karen seemed to be searching for words. Melody, that was extraordinary. You composed that yourself? Melody nodded, embarrassed by the intensity of Karen's gaze. Have you ever performed? In front of an audience, I mean? Just at school recitals when I was younger. Mom always wanted me to play more, but I got nervous. Karen was quiet for a moment, tapping her fingers thoughtfully against her knee. Then she said, "There's a competition coming up. The Young Stars talent show. The grand prize is $25,000. Melody's heart jumped at the number. $25,000. That kind of money could change everything. They could get an apartment, buy food, clothes, everything Elijah needed. But then reality crashed back in. I can't enter something like that. I don't have an address or nice clothes or even a way to practice regularly. And what would I do with Elijah during the performance?" Karen considered this. "The preliminary round is next Saturday. You'd need a piece prepared. Something that showcases both technical skill and emotional depth. As for practicing," she glanced around the room, "I'm here Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings. If you came during my lessons, you could use the practice room down the hall. No one uses it these days since the old piano in there needs tuning." "Why would you help us?" Melody asked, the suspicion that had kept them safe these past months rising to the surface. "You don't even know us." Karen's expression softened. "Because when I was about your age, someone helped me when I needed it. And because talent like yours doesn't come along often, it would be a crime to let it go to waste." She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. "Think about it. The competition could be a new start for you both." Later that night, huddled under a bridge as rain began to fall again, Melody held a sleeping Elijah close and stared at the card in her hand. The competition seemed like an impossible dream. Even if she could practice, even if she found something to wear, even if she somehow managed to keep Elijah quiet during her performance. What judge would take a homeless teenager seriously? But as Elijah coughed in his sleep, a rattling sound that worried her, Melody thought of what that prize money could mean. A warm place to live, doctor visits when they needed them. "Regular meals, what do you think, Eli?" she whispered to her sleeping brother. Should we take a chance? In the morning, she would use the last of her coins to call the number on Karen's card. For the first time in months, Melody fell asleep with something new flickering in her chest. A small, fragile spark of hope. The small practice room smelled of dust and old sheet music. Melody sat at the upright piano, its ivory keys yellowed with age, while Elijah played with a set of plastic cups on a blanket beside her. Karen had been true to her word. For the past 2 weeks, Melody had been allowed to use this forgotten room 3 evenings a week, while Karen taught her regular students down the hall. "Let's try it again," Melody whispered to herself, positioning her hands on the keys. She'd chosen to play her own composition for the competition. The lullaby she'd written for Elijah, expanded into a full piece with a middle section that built to an emotional peak before returning to the gentle melody. It told their story without words, loss, struggle, and the love that kept them going. She played the opening perfectly, her fingers finding the familiar pattern with ease. But as she transitioned to the more complex middle section, her hand stumbled over a particularly difficult run of notes. Melody bit her lip in frustration. "It's okay," she told herself. "One more time." Just as she was about to start again, Elijah knocked over his tower of cups and began to cry. Melody immediately left the piano and scooped him up. "It's okay, buddy." She bounced him gently. "We still have 20 minutes before we need to go. You can do this for me, right?" Elijah's cries didn't stop. Melody felt his forehead. It was warm. Too warm. The worry that had been building all day sharpened into fear. He'd been fussy since morning. refusing most of his breakfast and napping fitfully during the day. A knock at the door made her turn. Karen stood there, concern evident on her face. "Everything all right?" she asked, stepping into the room. "I could hear him from down the hall. He's been cranky all day," Melody explained, still bouncing Elijah in her arms. "And I think he has a fever." Karen crossed the room and gently placed her hand on Elijah's forehead. "He does feel warm. There's a free clinic about 10 blocks from here. They're open until 8. Melody glanced at the piano, torn between her brother's needs and the looming competition. The preliminary round was in just 3 days. "Go," Karen said firmly, reading her thoughts. "Elijah comes first. We can arrange extra practice time tomorrow. But your students, I'll move some things around. Now go take care of this little guy." The walk to the clinic took longer than expected. Elijah cried the whole way, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by miserable sobs that tore at Melody's heart. By the time they reached the small building with its free community health services sign, her arms ached from carrying him and her shirt was damp with his tears. The waiting room was crowded with tired-looking people and fussy children. Melody signed in and found a seat in the corner, away from curious eyes. She was used to the looks by now, the way people noticed her too thin frame, her worn clothes, and how young she seemed to be Elijah's mother. "Parker," a nurse called after nearly 2 hours of waiting. The examination room was brightly lit and smelled strongly of disinfectant. The doctor, an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes, listened as Melody explained Elijah's symptoms. "Looks like an ear infection," she said after examining him. "Common in babies his age. I'll write a prescription for antibiotics." Melody's heart sank. "How much will that cost?" The doctor must have heard the fear in her voice because her expression softened. "The clinic has a program for families in need. We can provide the medication at no cost." She paused, studying Melody more closely. "Is there anything else you need help with?" For a brief moment, Melody considered telling this kind woman everything. About their mother dying, about living on the streets, about her desperate attempt to keep them together. But the fear of being separated from Elijah was too strong. "We're okay," she lied. "Thank you for helping with the medicine." It was nearly 10 o'clock when they finally left the clinic. Elijah's prescription filled and his fever reduced thanks to infant acetaminophen, provided by the clinic. The streets were dark and mostly empty, as Melody made her way back toward the abandoned storage shed behind an old warehouse where they'd been sleeping for the past week. "Almost home. Buddy?" she whispered to Elijah, who had finally fallen into a fitful sleep against her shoulder. The night air had turned cold, with a damp chill that seeped through her thin jacket. When they reached the shed, Melody carefully pushed open the door, trying not to make noise that might attract attention. Inside, she laid Elijah on their makeshift bed, a pile of flattened cardboard boxes covered with the cleanest blankets she could find at the donation center. She gave him his first dose of medicine, then curled around his small body, trying to share her warmth. Tomorrow they would go back to the community center, and she would practice as much as possible before Elijah needed her attention again. "We can do this," she whispered into the darkness. "Just a few more days until the competition." Morning came with a steady rain that turned the city into a blur of gray. Melody woke to find Elijah's fever had broken, but he was still fussy and uncomfortable. She gave him another dose of medicine, packed their few belongings, and headed out into the downpour. Their usual morning spot near the coffee shop was useless in this weather, so Melody took shelter in the public library instead. She sat in the children's section, helping Elijah turn the pages of board books while she mentally practiced her piece, her fingers moving silently in her lap. "You should be preparing for school, not taking care of a baby," a voice interrupted her thoughts. Melody looked up to see an older woman watching her from a nearby table. There was no judgment in her face, just a soft sadness. "I'm homeschooled," Melody lied automatically. It was easier than explaining that she hadn't been to school in months, not since her mother entered hospice care. The woman nodded, not pressing further. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a granola bar. "For you," she said, placing it on the table. "Growing girls need to eat." Before Melody could thank her, the woman walked away, disappearing among the bookshelves. These small kindnesses from strangers had become their lifeline. A sandwich offered here, $1 there. Occasionally, a new pack of diapers from a mother who noticed Elijah's were nearly gone. By the time they reached the community center that afternoon, The rain had stopped, but the sky remained heavy with clouds. Karen was waiting for them in the practice room, a concerned look on her face. "How is he?" she asked, gently touching Elijah's cheek. "Better," Melody said. "The doctor said it's an ear infection. He gave us medicine." Karen nodded. "Good, and how are you holding up?" The simple question nearly broke Melody's composure. When was the last time someone had asked how she was doing? She swallowed hard against the sudden lump in her throat. "I'm okay. Just need to practice." Karen didn't push, but she did have a surprise. "I brought something for you," she said, reaching into a large bag beside the piano. She pulled out a simple blue dress. "For the competition. It was my niece's, but she outgrew it last year." Melody touched the soft fabric reverently. "I can't." "You can," Karen interrupted firmly. "And there's something else." From her pocket she produced a small plastic card. "This is a key card for the side entrance. The center's director agreed to let you use this room whenever you need to until the competition. He's an old friend and I told him about your talent." Melody stared at the card, unable to believe what she was hearing. "You told him about us? About me and Elijah?" "Just that you're a gifted young pianist who needs practice space," Karen assured her. "Nothing more. Your story is yours to tell when and if you choose to." Relief flooded through Melody. Access to the piano whenever she needed it. It was more than she'd dared hope for. "Thank you," she whispered. The next 2 days passed in a blur of practice sessions, caring for Elijah as his infection slowly improved, and anxious preparations for the competition. Melody washed her hair in the community center's bathroom sink, carefully hand-washed their clothes in the same sink, and spent hours perfecting every note of her composition. On the day before the competition, disaster struck. A sudden downpour caught them as they walked from the library to the community center. By the time they reached shelter, they were soaked through. Worse, the sheet music Melody had carefully written out, Karen had shown her how to properly notate her composition, was ruined, the ink running in blue streams down the sodden pages. Melody stood in the practice room, dripping onto the floor, the destroyed music clutched in her hands. All her hard work gone. Elijah, sensing her distress, began to cry again, his infection making him more sensitive to her moods. The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. Melody sank to the floor, holding the ruined pages and sobbing quietly as months of exhaustion, fear, and stress crashed over her. That's how Karen found them minutes later, both siblings crying, one from physical pain and the other from something deeper. "Oh, Melody," Karen said softly, kneeling beside her. "What happened?" Through her tears, Melody explained about the rain, the ruined music, how she was afraid she'd forget the changes she'd made to her piece without the notation to guide her. Karen listened, then gently took the wet pages from Melody's hands and set them aside. "Do you remember what your mother used to tell you about playing?" she asked. Melody wiped her eyes. "She said that the notes on the page were just a map, but the real music lived inside me." "She was right," Karen said firmly. "The music is already in you, Melody. You don't need these pages to remember it." She helped Melody to her feet and guided her to the piano bench. "Play it now," she urged. "Not for the judges, not for the audience, but for Elijah. For your mother. For yourself." Melody placed her hands on the keys, closed her eyes, and began to play. The music flowed from her fingers, not perfect but honest, every note carrying the weight of their journey. When she finished, she opened her eyes to find Karen watching her with a proud smile. "That," Karen said softly, "is what will move the judges to tears." The morning of the competition arrived with a pale sun breaking through clouds. Melody woke early in their latest temporary shelter, a small alcove behind the community center that Karen had quietly suggested might be overlooked by security. She'd spent the night rehearsing her piece in her head, her fingers moving silently over imaginary keys even in her dreams. "Today's the big day, Eli," she whispered, gently waking her brother. His ear infection was improving, but he still wasn't back to his usual cheerful self. They had 3 hours before they needed to be at the auditorium where the Young Stars competition would be held. Melody had their day planned with military precision. First to the public restroom at the park to wash up as best she could, then to the community center where Karen had promised hot water and privacy for a proper cleanup, and finally to the competition venue. The park bathroom was cold and uninviting, but Melody made do. washing Elijah first in the sink with a travel-sized baby shampoo donated by the clinic. He fussed and squirmed, still not fully recovered, but she managed to get him reasonably clean. For herself, she used paper towels and hand soap, scrubbing her face and arms until her skin was pink. Almost fancy, she told her reflection with a shaky smile. At the community center, Karen was waiting with a small gym bag. "Quick, come in before anyone sees you," she said, ushering them through a back entrance. Inside a small office, Karen had prepared everything they needed: a portable heater, towels, the blue dress she'd given Melody, and most surprising of all, a tiny button-up shirt and pants for Elijah. "My nephew outgrew these," Karen explained, seeing Melody's expression. "I thought Elijah might want to look sharp today, too." Tears pricked at Melody's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Karen squeezed her shoulder. "Save those tears. You'll need all your emotions for your performance." 40 minutes later, Melody hardly recognized herself in the small mirror. The blue dress was simple but elegant, falling just below her knees. Karen had helped her braid her hair into a crown around her head, making her look older, more confident. Elijah, despite his lingering discomfort, looked adorable in his little outfit. "One last thing," Karen said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small silver locket on a thin chain. "This was my grandmother's. She always said that wearing it helped her feel brave. I thought you might borrow it for today." Melody was speechless as Karen fastened the necklace around her neck. The cool weight of the locket against her skin felt like armor. "Now," Karen said, checking her watch, "we should head to the venue. I've arranged for a taxi to take us." A taxi. Melody had never ridden in one before. "Today you're a star," Karen said firmly, "and stars don't walk 10 blocks in the cold." The Grand Theater lived up to its name. Its facade was old but well-maintained, with ornate details around tall windows and a marquee that now displayed "Young Stars Talent Competition" in bold letters. Inside, the lobby buzzed with activity: contestants clutching instrument cases, parents fussing over costumes, volunteers with clipboards directing traffic. Melody held Elijah tighter, suddenly overwhelmed by the noise and crowd. Everyone looked so polished, so prepared. A girl about her age walked by carrying a violin case, her hair perfectly styled, a man and woman flanking her protectively. Another contestant, a boy in a suit that probably cost more than Melody had seen in months, sat on a bench practicing finger movements for what appeared to be a complex piano piece. "Maybe this was a mistake," Melody whispered to Karen. "Nonsense," Karen replied, guiding her toward the registration desk. "Your music belongs here as much as anyone else's." The woman at the desk looked up as they approached. "Name?" she asked, pen poised over her list. "Melody Parker," Karen answered when Melody hesitated. "She's performing an original piano composition." The woman checked her list. "Parker? Yes, here you are. You'll be contestant number 17. She handed Melody a number card and a program, then looked at Elijah with a frown. "Is the baby part of the act?" Before Melody could answer, Karen stepped in. "He's her brother. Their parents couldn't make it today, so I'm standing in as guardian. Is there a problem?" The woman's frown deepened. "Contestants are supposed to wait backstage alone. No family members allowed until after the performance." Melody felt panic rising in her throat. She couldn't leave Elijah. He was still sick, still needed her. But saying that might raise questions she couldn't answer. "I understand the rules," Karen said smoothly. "But surely exceptions can be made for special circumstances. The baby is still recovering from an ear infection, and their parents specifically asked that they not be separated." The woman looked uncertain. "I'll need to check with the stage manager." "Of course," Karen agreed. "We'll wait right here." As the woman walked away, Melody turned to Karen with wide eyes. "What if they say no?" "I can't leave him." "They won't," Karen assured her, though her expression was less confident than her words. "And if they do, we'll figure something out. We've come too far to give up now." The wait for the stage manager felt eternal. Melody watched other contestants file past, each looking more confident and prepared than the last. A boy with a cello larger than he was. Twin girls in matching dresses, presumably for a duet. A teenager with bright blue hair carrying a guitar case covered in stickers. They all belonged here in a way Melody wasn't sure she ever could. Finally, a tall man with a headset and a harried expression approached them. "You're the one with the baby?" he asked, looking at Melody. She nodded, unconsciously holding Elijah closer. The man ran a hand through his thinning hair. Look, the rules are clear about backstage access. Please, Melody said, finding her voice. He's not feeling well. I'm all he has right now. The stage manager studied her face, then Elijah's, and something in his expression softened. My daughter had ear infections constantly at that age. Rough stuff. He sighed heavily. All right, here's what we can do. The baby can stay with you until just before your performance. Then he'll need to go with your guardian. He looked at Karen questioningly. Family friend, Karen supplied. Right. He'll go with her during your actual performance, and you can have him back as soon as you're done. That's the best I can do. Relief washed over Melody. Thank you. Thank you so much. The backstage area was a maze of curtains, equipment, and nervous energy. Contestants practiced silently, paced in small circles, or sat frozen with anxiety. Melody found a quiet corner where she could sit with Elijah while listening to the performances already underway. The competition had started, and through speakers mounted on the walls she could hear a flawless violin concerto being performed. Each act that followed seemed more impressive than the last. A classical guitar piece played with technical perfection, a young singer whose voice filled the theater with impossible power and control, a piano virtuoso racing through a piece so complex it made Melody's fingers ache just listening to it. Numbers 15 through 20, please prepare, a volunteer called. You're up after the break. Melody's heart began to race. She looked down at Elijah, who had finally fallen asleep against her chest, his breathing still slightly labored from his infection. For him, she reminded herself. This was all for him. Scared? Asked a voice beside her. Melody turned to see the blue-haired guitarist sitting nearby, tuning his instrument. Terrified, she admitted. He nodded. Me too, every time. But then I start playing and it all falls away. He nodded toward Elijah. Your kid? My brother, Melody corrected automatically. Cool that they let him backstage. They're usually super strict. Special circumstances, Melody said, not elaborating. The boy didn't press. Instead, he said, I'm doing an original song too. Wrote it after my dad left last year. Something about his casual honesty made Melody relax slightly. Mine's for my mom. She died a few months ago. And for him, she added, looking at Elijah. That's rough, the boy said simply. Bet it'll be good, though. The real stuff usually is. Before Melody could respond, Karen appeared at her side. They're almost ready for you, she said. How are you feeling? Like I might throw up, Melody admitted. Karen squeezed her hand. That's normal. Just remember why you're here. The next few minutes passed in a blur. The stage manager called Melody's name. Karen gently took Elijah, who woke and immediately began to fuss. The sight of her brother reaching for her as Karen carried him away nearly broke Melody's resolve. But she forced herself to focus on what was ahead. Next up, performing an original piano composition, please welcome contestant number 17, Melody Parker. The walk to the center of the stage felt like moving through water. The lights were blinding, making it impossible to see the audience, but Melody could feel their presence. Hundreds of people waiting to judge her, to decide if her music was worthy. The grand piano gleamed under the spotlights, far more impressive than any instrument she'd ever played. As she sat on the bench, adjusting it slightly, Melody caught sight of the judges' table. 4 people sat there, their expressions varying from boredom to mild interest. One, an older man with silver hair and round glasses, was writing something on his scorecard without even looking up. Melody placed her hands on the keys, took a deep breath, and then, from somewhere in the wings came the sound of Elijah crying. She froze, her fingers hovering above the keys. The cry came again, louder this time. A murmur ran through the audience. One of the judges looked up with a frown. For a brief, terrible moment, Melody considered running from the stage. But then, almost without conscious thought, she adjusted her position and began to play. The opening notes of her lullaby filled the theater, soft but clear. She played it exactly as she had for Elijah countless times, in the community center, under bridges, in abandoned buildings, anywhere they could find shelter. As the familiar melody wrapped around her, Melody closed her eyes, shutting out the judges, the audience, the intimidating venue. In her mind, she was back with her mother, learning this very piano, laughing when she hit wrong notes, beaming with pride when she got it right. She was in their old apartment, playing their second-hand upright while her mother rocked baby Elijah. She was in a dozen different hiding places, using her music to soothe her brother's fears and her own. From the wings, Elijah's cries began to quiet, as if he too recognized the melody meant just for him. Melody opened her eyes and smiled slightly, drawing strength from his response. She moved into the middle section of her piece, where the music grew more complex, more urgent, like their life on the streets, full of challenges but with that same thread of love running throughout. Her fingers flew across the keys with a confidence she hadn't known she possessed. Every mistake she'd worried about, every difficult transition she'd practiced for hours, all of it came together perfectly, as if her mother's hands were guiding her own. As she returned to the original melody for the final section, Melody looked up briefly and caught sight of Karen standing in the wings. Elijah now quiet in her arms, both watching with matching expressions of wonder. A single tear slid down Melody's cheek as she played the final notes, letting them fade slowly into silence. For one terrible moment, there was no reaction at all. Then from somewhere in the back, a person began to clap. Another joined and another, until the entire theater erupted in applause. Melody stood shakily, her legs barely supporting her as she faced the audience she still couldn't see clearly through the lights, and her own tears. At the judges' table, the silver-haired man who hadn't bothered to look up when she took the stage was now openly weeping. Wiping his eyes with a handkerchief, Melody Parker, homeless and alone except for her infant brother, had done the impossible. She had moved the world with nothing but her music and her heart. The applause seemed to go on forever. Melody stood on the stage, her legs trembling, as wave after wave of clapping washed over her. She'd never heard anything like it. Hundreds of people, many on their feet responding to her music, to her heart laid bare through the piano. A stagehand appeared at her elbow, gently guiding her toward the wings where Karen waited with Elijah. As soon as she was off stage, Melody reached for her brother, needing to hold him close after pouring so much of their shared pain and hope into her performance. "That was incredible," Karen whispered, her own eyes wet with tears. "Absolutely incredible." The blue-haired guitarist who'd spoken to Melody earlier stood nearby, his mouth slightly open in shock. "Dude," he said finally, "that wasn't just good. That was like life-changing." Melody barely heard them. The emotional toll of her performance had left her drained, as if she'd given away pieces of herself through the music. She held Elijah against her chest, drawing strength from his solid warmth. "Miss Parker?" The stage manager appeared, looking at Melody with newfound respect. "The judges would like to see you after the final competitor performs. It's unusual, but—" He shrugged as if to say he didn't make the rules. Karen squeezed her arm reassuringly. "That's a good sign." The next 20 minutes crawled by as they waited through the final 3 performances. Good as they were, Melody noticed the audience response wasn't nearly as enthusiastic as what she'd received. A tiny spark of hope began to kindle inside her. When the last contestant finished, a boy performing an impressive trumpet solo, the stage manager reappeared. "They're ready for you," he said. "Just you," he added when Karen started to follow. Melody hesitated, looking at Elijah. "We'll be right here," Karen promised. "Go on." The judges sat at their table in the now empty theater. The audience had been dismissed while the panel deliberated, leaving the vast space eerily quiet. Melody approached slowly, suddenly conscious of her second-hand dress and borrowed necklace. 4 people watched her approach. A woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes, a younger man with a fashionable beard and glasses, a middle-aged woman whose elegant posture suggested a background in dance or performance, and the older man with silver hair and round glasses who had been moved to tears by her playing. It was he who spoke first, rising from his seat as she reached their table. "Miss Parker," he said, his voice carrying the slight accent of someone who had grown up speaking another language. "My name is Dr. Anton Petrov. I am the head of the piano department at the National Conservatory of Music." Melody nodded, unsure what to say. "I have been judging this competition for 15 years, he continued. In that time, I have heard many technically perfect performances, many impressive displays of skill." He paused, looking at her with an intensity that made her want to look away. "But rarely have I heard music that speaks so directly to the heart." The other judges nodded in agreement. "Your piece," the woman with the dancer's posture said, "tells a story. May we ask what inspired it?" Melody swallowed hard. She'd never put her story into words for strangers before. "I wrote it for my brother," she said simply. "After our mom died. It's about how we keep going, how we hold on to each other." Dr. Petrov nodded as if she'd confirmed something he'd already guessed. "And you compose this yourself? No formal training?" "My mother taught me to play. She was a pianist too before." Melody trailed off. "The composition is mine. I started writing it the first night we were on our own." A flicker of surprise crossed the judges' faces. "On your own?" the bearded man asked. Melody hesitated. She'd said too much already, but something about their genuine interest made her continue. "My mom got sick last year, cancer. She died 3 months ago. Our stepdad left soon after. There was no one else to take care of Elijah, so—" She lifted her chin slightly. "So I did." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken questions. Dr. Petrov broke it finally. "Miss Parker, your circumstances aside, which speak to your remarkable character, your gift is extraordinary. Raw perhaps, but extraordinary nonetheless." He glanced at his fellow judges, who all nodded in agreement. "We would like to offer you something beyond the competition prize." Melody's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "The National Conservatory has a full scholarship program for exceptional young musicians. Room, board, tuition, all covered. Based on what we heard today, I am prepared to offer you a place in that program starting next semester." The world seemed to tilt beneath Melody's feet. A scholarship. Room and board. It was beyond anything she'd dared to hope for. "But," she began, the reality of her situation crashing back. "I can't leave my brother. He needs me." Dr. Petrov smiled gently. "The conservatory has family housing for special circumstances. It's not unprecedented for our students to have dependents." "And the competition?" Melody asked, her head spinning with possibilities. "Ah, yes." The gray-haired woman spoke up. "That's rather a foregone conclusion at this point, but we should maintain proper procedure. The results will be announced shortly." They dismissed her then, with Dr. Petrov pressing a business card into her hand and instructing her to call him the following day to discuss details. Melody walked back to the wings in a daze. "What happened?" Karen asked as soon as she saw her. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Melody explained what the judges had said about her performance, the scholarship offer, the possibility of housing for both her and Elijah. As she spoke, the full weight of the opportunity began to sink in. "Karen," she whispered, "they want to give me a future." Before Karen could respond, the stage manager called for all contestants to return to the stage for the results. With Elijah back in Karen's arms, Melody joined the line of nervous performers filing onto the bright stage. A local celebrity had been brought in to announce the winners. Melody barely heard as third place was awarded to a flutist, and second to the violin player who had performed first. Then came a pause, a dramatic building of tension that seemed to stretch forever, and the grand prize winner of this year's Young Stars competition, with a truly unforgettable original piano composition, Melody Parker. The applause erupted again, even louder than before. Someone pressed a trophy into her hands. A giant check for $25,000 was brought onto the stage. Cameras flashed. The other contestants congratulated her, some genuinely, others with forced smiles. Through it all, Melody felt strangely calm. The prize money would change their lives immediately. A safe place to live, proper care for Elijah, stability they hadn't known since before her mother got sick. And beyond that, the scholarship promised a future she'd never dared imagine. As the crowd began to disperse and the excitement died down, Melody found herself standing in the empty theater with Karen and Elijah, the oversized check propped against a nearby chair. "I can't believe this is happening," she said softly. Karen smiled. "Believe it. You earned every bit of it. I don't even know where to start. Getting an apartment, figuring out legal guardianship for Elijah." The tasks ahead seemed overwhelming, even with the prize money. "One step at a time," Karen assured her. "And you won't be doing it alone." 6 months later, Melody sat at the piano in her small apartment near the conservatory campus. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. On the wall hung her competition trophy and a framed photo of her mother, the only one she'd managed to save from their old life. Elijah, now 14 months old, played on a colorful mat nearby, stacking blocks with intense concentration. He'd grown so much in the past months, healthy and thriving now that they had stability, proper nutrition, and regular medical care. The apartment was modest but clean and safe, paid for with a combination of her prize money and stipend from the conservatory's family housing program. Melody had been able to establish legal guardianship of Elijah, with help from a law clinic Karen had connected her with. There had been hurdles, of course, questions about her age, her ability to care for a child while studying, the absence of their stepfather, but her determination and the support of her growing network of allies had prevailed. Dr. Petrov had proven to be a demanding but compassionate mentor, pushing Melody to develop the technical skills that would match her natural emotional depth. "Your music has the soul," he often told her. "Now we give it the vocabulary to speak even more clearly." Karen still visited once a week, bringing groceries and staying to give Melody piano lessons beyond her conservatory classes. She'd become the closest thing to family they had. Not quite a mother, but more than just a teacher or friend. The journey wasn't without its challenges. Balancing her intensive studies with raising Elijah required constant juggling. Some nights Melody still woke in a panic, momentarily forgetting they were safe, thinking they were back on the streets. And there were practical hurdles too, navigating social services, healthcare systems, and the legal complexities of their unusual situation. But they were making it. Step by step, day by day, they were building a life from the ashes of what they'd lost. A knock at the door interrupted Melody's practice. She opened it to find a delivery person holding a large envelope. "Melody Parker, this is for you." Inside was a letter from a prestigious recording label. They'd heard about her story, seen a viral video of her competition performance that someone had uploaded, and wanted to discuss the possibility of recording her original compositions. Melody sat down heavily on the couch, the letter trembling in her hands. From homeless and hopeless to this, all because she'd refused to give up, refused to be separated from her brother, refused to let go of the music that connected her to her mother. Elijah abandoned his blocks and crawled into her lap, reaching for the paper with curious fingers. Melody held him close, breathing in the clean baby shampoo smell of his hair. "Look at this, Eli," she whispered. "Look how far we've come." She carried him to the piano and sat him on her lap, just as she had during those desperate nights in the community center. Her fingers found the keys and she began to play their lullaby, the piece that had changed everything. But now the music had transformed. Where once it carried only survival and desperate love, it now spoke of hope, of possibility, of a future neither of them would face alone. As evening fell, their silhouette against the window, big sister and little brother at the piano, looked much the same as it had in those dark days. But the music, like their lives, had found its way home.